People always talk about avoidance disappearing, but no one talks about the moment the empath becomes the one who quietly backs away. The moment the giver becomes the ghost, the healer becomes the one who stops picking up the phone. And the woman who used to hold emotional space for everyone suddenly has none left for anyone. It feels wrong, even to her. It feels like becoming someone she never thought she'd be. But here's the truth. No one wants to admit burnout changes attachment styles, exhaustion rewires instincts, and even the most open-hearted empath can reach a point where shutting down feels like the only way to survive. This is the silent role reversal almost no one discusses when the empath becomes the avoidant. Not because she stopped caring, but because caring cost her too much. And if you've ever felt yourself pulling away from someone you once wanted deeply, this video will help you understand what's really happening inside you, psychologically, emotionally, and yes, even unconsciously. Let's get straight into it. It begins with an internal contradiction. Empaths are wired to connect, to understand, to stabilize emotional storms. Not because they're trying to be martyrs, but because their nervous system registers someone else's pain almost as strongly as their own. Jung would say they project their undeveloped strength outward, hoping to save in others what they struggle to honor in themselves. But something shifts after prolonged emotional overextension. A slow psychological inversion takes place. The empath doesn't wake up one morning suddenly dismissive, distant, or cold. It happens in layers. The first layer is emotional depletion. It's the moment she realizes that she is carrying the emotional weight of their relationship again, that she is anticipating the other person's reactions, smoothing over conflicts, over-explaining her intentions, and cushioning their insecurities. She thinks she's helping. She thinks she's preventing problems. But really, she's draining herself dry while the other person remains comfortably unaware. Then comes the resentment she doesn't want to admit. Not explosive, not dramatic. Just a low-grade tension in her chest, an inner whisper saying, "Why am I the only one showing up?" And with resentment comes the second layer, emotional withdrawal. This is where the role reversal begins. The empath doesn't slam doors. She doesn't declare her detachment. She simply stops offering pieces of herself that aren't reciprocated. That warmth she used to radiate so naturally, she pulls it in. The emotional labor she used to give so freely, she pauses. The explanations, the reassurances, the checking in, she grows silent. To the other person, it looks like she's suddenly changed. But the truth is simpler. Her nervous system has reached capacity. Jung would call this a confrontation with the shadow, the part of the self the empath has spent years denying, the part that says, "I need something back. I need support, too. I can't keep giving without receiving." But because she's not used to asserting these needs, she doesn't always articulate them. She creates distance instead. Not intentionally avoidant, but instinctively protective. And here's where the psychological twist appears. When the empath pulls back, she doesn't feel relief the way an avoidant does. She feels guilt, confusion, disorientation. She wonders, why can't I be as patient as before? Why does contact feel draining instead of comforting? Why does their message make me sigh instead of smile? She thinks she's becoming cold, but really she's becoming honest with herself. Burnout forces clarity, and clarity forces boundaries. The third stage is what I call emotional numbness, not as a personality shift, but as a temporary survival mechanism. When an empath burns out, her system shuts down excess input the way a circuit breaker shuts down electricity during overload. She stops feeling everything so intensely because her psyche needs to prevent further depletion. During this stage, she operates more like an avoidant, not because she's afraid of intimacy, but because she's exhausted by imbalance. She stops chasing emotional resolution. She stops trying to fix other people's moods. She stops carrying the relationship on her back. People misinterpret this withdrawal as indifference. It's not indifference. It's self-preservation. And here's the part most empaths never see coming. Once she enters this avoidant-like state, her tolerance for inconsistency disappears. She no longer has patience for mixed signals, hot and cold behavior, emotional unavailability, or relational ambiguity. Before burnout, she'd rationalize it. After burnout, she feels repelled by it. Her psyche has recalibrated. Jung would say her anima, the inner feminine, has moved from self-sacrifice to self-protection. The pendulum is swinging from overgiving to recalibrating personal power. And when this happens, the other person often reacts with shock, because the empath who once seemed endlessly understanding now has limits. She has distance. She has boundaries. She has a threshold. And when she reaches that threshold, the role reversal becomes complete. She becomes the one who needs space, the one who pulls back, the one who stops initiating, the one who feels overwhelmed by emotional demands rather than energized by them. And this brings us to the psychological core of the transformation. When an empath becomes avoidant, it's almost always because her emotional needs went unheard for too long. Not because someone intentionally harmed her, but because she trained them not to notice. She trained them to think she'd always adapt, always forgive, always be understanding, always hold things together. But eventually, she reaches the truth every empath learns at some point. You cannot regulate someone else's emotions and your own at the same time. Something will break. And that something is usually you. So what happens next? The inner shift continues. The empath begins to listen to her fatigue instead of suppressing it. She begins to value her peace more than maintaining connection. She begins to see where she's been over-functioning, over-giving, over-explaining, and overstretching. And little by little, she realizes she wasn't the secure one. She was the self-sacrificing one. And self-sacrifice is not the same as emotional stability. Once she realizes this, she starts to rebuild the connection, not with the other person, but with herself. And this is the stage where the transformation stops being a reaction and starts becoming a recalibration. She isn't becoming an avoidant permanently. She's integrating the part of herself she used to reject. The part that says no, the part that pulls back, the part that protects her energy, the part that refuses to be emotionally drained. Jung would say she is reclaiming her shadow and balancing her psyche. Here's the most important part. The empath doesn't pull away because she stopped loving. She pulls away because the relationship became unsustainable for her nervous system. And until she feels safe, supported, and balanced, she cannot re-engage with the same openness she once had. This is why so many empaths feel foreign in their own bodies during this shift. They're not used to needing space. They're not used to feeling overwhelmed by someone else's emotions. They're not used to withdrawing. But once burnout hits, their psychological instincts change. The empath becomes avoidant, not out of fear, but out of necessity, and the healing begins the moment she stops judging herself for it. When she realizes that boundaries don't make her cold, that distance doesn't make her unloving, that protecting her emotional energy doesn't make her avoidant, it makes her balanced. Empaths don't actually turn into avoidance. They simply stop abandoning themselves. When that happens, everything in their relational world changes. They stop choosing people who need saving. They stop tolerating emotional imbalance. They stop mistaking intensity for connection. They stop carrying relationships that others won't carry with them. They move from self-erasure to self-respect. And once that happens, they don't go back. If you've felt yourself withdrawing, growing quieter, becoming more selective about who gets access to your heart, understand this: you're not losing your empathy. You're learning how to protect it. And that is what finally breaks the cycle that burned you out in the first place.